that avoiding this debt ceiling, or now that we have this debt deal, that we've somehow escaped this idea of being downgraded. But that's not in fact the case. You know, we're still very much a candidate for being downgraded, because the reality is the world did not react well to us taking so long to come out with this debt deal. And so what he's saying is there's repercussions.
This is a drama that Americans love, and the world watches to love it.
So, I mean, what do you think? I mean,
the world loves to watch it.
They do, but I think this is coming at a very interesting time. You know, here we are looking at potentially being downgraded from our AAA ratings at the same time that we've got tremendous growth out of China and out of India. Let's leave India out of the equation, because the rest of the world is so focused on China that this kind of a downgrade, if it occurs with the U.S., is almost like saying it's a vote of confidence for China as a new and emerging superpower, maybe even poised to take over the U.S. in terms of how big an economy they represent to the rest of the world.
You know, cash and carry is absolutely right, but one other thing, folks, I want to tell you. America represents 30% of AAA universe out there. 30%.
And because
so
we're
they're going to be AA. Do you think people will just start saying we can't depend on the American currency, or we cannot depend on the American nation? We are still the reserve currency. We are still the best that's out there. And yeah, all of these rating agencies, they're actually playing with fire. You know, I mean, there's no way America is going bankrupt.
So you think that these rating agencies are just sort of politically posturing themselves as a way to get their motivations through whatever political legislation they want out of the U.S. I don't know about that so much. I think that China stands to gain as a result, and I think that just the perception, the mere perception of the U.S. falling off its perch, off of its pedestal, will be enough to swing the pendulum, or to start to swing the pendulum towards other countries, and I think that's not a good thing for the U.S.
Cash and Carry has done very well for himself, and he's a good speaker, and his TARP really did help, I must say that. At the same time, I really think now that he's in the PIMCO fund, now he's dependent upon all those ratings and this
so
and that, and
he's
worried about it, you know. But now it's his business. He's
well, you know, at the time, Neil Kashkari, for those of us that will remember, was part of the architect of this big grand bailout. And it's interesting to hear from him on this subject from the other side, which is what you're saying.
You know, Michelle Singletary is a columnist for Washington Post, and she came out this past week and said one of the best things IRS has done is the innocent spouse rule. Now, folks, you understand that generally in the American families, men always prepare the tax returns. Very few women do. And consequently, what happens that if they understate the taxes, or if they, you know, cheat on their taxes, generally the wife doesn't know about it, you know, or the spouse doesn't know about it. Let's talk both sexes in here. So what IRS has done is said, look, first of all, you know, the scale is pretty high to climb for proving yourself that you're an innocent spouse. But if you are able to prove it, then what it is if you have the money, you know, it's not that he just never paid the IRS and took it out and went and spent on drinking and other things. Well, in that case, you know, you are going to be let go. But otherwise, you have to pay your share. But for penalties and interest and the jail time and the others, they're going to look to the person who actually prepared the tax return. This is the first time IRS has been actually this generous.
I think it's actually a good trend because, as you said, there are so often cases where women, they're not responsible necessarily for understanding their husband's business, how it runs, how it operates, but they're liable by being married. Yep. And I think, if anything, the women should learn a lesson out of things like this, which is to take a little more control, be a little more vigilant, and be a little bit more of a participant along with their husbands when the taxes are done. I think women still, I hate to say this, but a lot of women, especially my mother's age and in that generation, are still somewhat afraid of the books. Right? They're afraid of getting in, understanding the math, what goes where, what is being allocated where. But it makes sense for us to understand that at a deeper level so that we don't get caught off guard. What happens to these women is they live a certain kind of life, and then when something like this happens, their husband gets arrested or, you know, accused of tax evasion, tax fraud, they get caught up in that swirl too, and they lose their entire livelihoods, which is not fair.
Actually, there was a case right here in Virginia I want to tell you about, in construction. You know, you need to have a bond. It's a third-party insurance that you will finish the job at the price that you quoted. The bonding companies want to make sure that the husband and wife signatures are there because they own the entire you along with your wife. Now, wives reluctantly sign it, but they do sign it. So in this particular case, this contractor actually went bankrupt on a particular job, so the shorty took it, and then they sued him and his wife, who was a physician. You know, she's a physician. So they took her money as well, and she went fighting all the way to Supreme Court. And guess what? She lost because she had already signed it. In that case, I would have said this IRS ruling should have prevailed in the court of law as well.
And it goes to show you that anytime you sign anything, even if you're getting married to the person, you have to be smart. You have to think about, to some degree, your own self-protection.
So you're saying that everybody should have a prenup agreement before they get married?
No, but I'm saying you have to go in with your eyes wide open. Well, folks, we've talked about India's growth. It's a frequent topic on our show. And lately, we've been talking about the importance of manufacturing in India's growth. You know, this is because India has a young population and they need jobs. So not everyone can go right into the service sector and find a way to be employed. And therefore, manufacturing really needs to take root in the country to help it propel itself forward, especially if it's going to compete with China and with the U.S. and so forth. This is an article out of the New York Times that really sheds a good light on what's happening in India on the manufacturing front. Did you know that Indian exports of goods are now nearly double the export of services, which was something I didn't realize. India as a nation has always been so service-centric, especially with all the outsourcing. Yeah. We don't think of manufacturing as being at the forefront, but Indian exports of goods are now nearly double the exports of services, growing 37.5% to $245 billion in the 12 months that ended in March. That's a tremendous growth. Not only that, leading the way are high-value products like industrial machinery, automobiles, car parts, and refined petroleum products. There's a reason why these specific things were mentioned. You know, they did a comparison in this article between how China became a manufacturing hub and how India is approaching the same thing. What you notice about China is it flooded the market with a lot of cheap goods, which is why we can afford everything now, right? It costs much less than it used to cost. On the other hand, these were not high-value machine or manufacturing outputs. These were not sophisticated systems. These were not expensive, large-scale devices, right?
That goes to China.
Right, that's what China was doing. India is trying to take a different approach. It is going after that expensive machinery. It wants to be more like a Germany than a China when it comes to manufacturing, which I thought was a very interesting comparison to make. If you think about Germany, Germany didn't flood the market with